for your help. Gerald sincerely thanked her. Yes, thank you, Carl echoed. Although they were very close now, it was still necessary for them to thank her. Quickly, come out with me, Ariana said. She was slightly weak. They were able to walk. Although he knew Ariana could handle it, he didn't want her to be burdened. Over the past 2 years, Ariana had helped the Red Flame out with many tasks. So Gerald and Carl gradually became aware that not only did she and Henry have magical powers, but they also had the help of magical monsters. Therefore, Gerald and Carl had seen the two sea monsters before. The mutant fox and the tree vine weren't strange to them either, so they weren't shocked, but the battle still amazed them. Because it wasn't a battle among mortals, it was extremely fierce, and they all used magical skills. Even the underground hall couldn't absorb the violence. As a result, it suddenly shook heavily. The next moment, stones and sand started falling, indicating that the ceiling was going to collapse. Go out now, Henry shouted at them. They had to get out of there as soon as possible and leave those mutants behind. Without delay, they immediately ran to the passage where they came from. However, the moment they gathered together, the ceiling of the hall fell. Ariana quickly released her magical power to make a barrier and protect them. Because of that, the rocks and sand couldn't smash them, but they were buried underneath it all. Under the extreme pressure, Ariana found it hard to breathe. The ground about the hall was about 20 yards thick, so it was unbelievably heavy. It was like a mountain, and Ariana could barely hold it. Seeing that, Henry and Ava joined Ariana and supported the barrier together. What should we do? Gerald asked worriedly. After all, Ariana and the others were caught in this trouble because of him and Carl, so he blamed himself. Don't worry, we'll find a way to leave this place, Ariana assured him. She wasn't worried at all. They were stuck for the time being, but she could think of a solution. Hearing her confidence, Gerald and Carl were less anxious. Because the ground was still shaking, they did nothing, deciding to wait until it stopped. At the same time, Ariana used her jade eyes to look around. The ninjas and mutants were already dead and buried in the dirt. The earthquake didn't stop until half an hour later, at which point Ariana asked the tree vine to dig a passage out. The tree vine immediately obeyed. Although there were rocks mixed in the sand, and it wasn't easy to dig a path through, the tree vine was able to do it. However, they were deep under the ground, so the tree vine worked for a long time until a passage that could allow a person to pass was made. Once it was complete, Ivory went out first, then Ariana. She put the mutant fox back into her telepathic eye space before going out. Henry protected Carl when they went out, while Ava protected Gerald. Flint was the final one to emerge. Because the passage was straight, they didn't climb out slowly, but directly flew outside. Gerald and Carl felt as if they were being taken to the sky by a strong force, so they were scared. They didn't come back to their senses until they had been back on the ground for a long while. Unfortunately, when they were about to leave, they heard a buzz over their heads. It was 3 enemy helicopters flying towards them. Obviously, there were more ninjas and mutants coming. Let's hide now, Henry ordered. Then they hid in a small cave at the foot of a rocky formation. At the same time, Henry waved his hand and summoned up a small sandstorm to cover the cave. They weren't afraid of the ninjas and mutants, but they needed to wait until they landed to attack them. Otherwise, the ninjas and mutants might directly leave if they saw them. Even if they didn't come down, Henry and the others could still deal with them, but it would be more convenient to have the battle on the ground. About 10 minutes later, the 3 helicopters landed. Although it was usually impossible for helicopters his own eyes. Can the fox turn into a human as well? Carl wondered aloud, turning to stare at the mutant fox. It can't do that right now, but perhaps in the near future, the tree vine said. Wow, that's unbelievable, Carl remarked, feeling amazed again. About 10 minutes later, Ariana and the others had killed all of the ninjas and mutants. When they came back to check on Gerald and Carl, and saw that the tree vine had turned into a boy, Ariana frowned slightly and asked, "Did you scare them?" Although she didn't want the tree vine to show its abilities in front of other people, it wasn't a big deal if it already did. They were scared, but not too badly, the tree vine giggled. "All right, we need to get out of here. We can use their helicopters to leave," Henry interjected. Since there were helicopters, there was no need to fly on their swords. Gerald and Carl didn't know that they had that ability, so they wanted to keep it a secret. After that, they climbed aboard one of the helicopters. "Master, can I stay out for a while longer? I want to go on the helicopter too. I haven't been on one before," the tree vine begged Ariana. "All right," Ariana responded. Because the helicopters could accommodate 6 people, and the sea monsters and the mutant fox were already put back into Ariana's telepathic eye space, there was enough space for all of them. Henry flew the helicopter because Gerald and Carl were still weak. After the helicopter rose up into the air, the tree vine looked around and saw that there was only sand in his view. "Wow, there is sand everywhere," he said excitedly. He had seen a desert on TV before, but this was the first one he had seen in real life. When they were on the ground earlier, he didn't pay much attention to the surroundings, since his view was blocked by large stones. "When I saw a desert on TV, I was amazed by how big it was. Now that I see it with my own eyes, it looks even bigger. I bet people can easily get lost walking in it," the tree vine said, then added, "I also want to see the ocean. Master, can you let me out when you go to the ocean in the future?" "No problem," Ariana chuckled. "I feel as if he's really a human. I can't believe he's actually not," Gerald remarked in surprise. He still needed time to digest this shocking news. Ever since he acquired the ability to turn into a boy, he has learned to surf on the internet and read, so he knows a lot. He looks like an 8-year-old boy, but he knows a lot more than kids his age, Ariana said. "Will you send him to school?" Gerald asked. "No, he's a monster, and he needs to cultivate normally. He doesn't have time to study, and it's useless for him anyway. He only needs to improve his level of cultivation until he'll be of great help to me in the future. I can raise him," Ariana explained. "You're right," Gerald agreed. Airplanes were faster than a flying sword, but helicopters were slower, so they didn't reach the edge of the Demon Valley Desert until an hour later. However, they didn't stop right there. Instead, they flew as close as possible to Mesquite, then landed where there was no one around. Afterwards, Ariana put the tree vine away in her telepathic eye space. They then called Glenn at once and asked him to fetch them. He got out of the car and rushed to give Gerald and Carl a big hug. He didn't even have time to greet Henry and the others. He could have lost his two close comrades, so he couldn't wait to embrace them when he saw them again. Glenn even felt like crying and whimpered, "I'm so glad you're fine. I thought I might never see you again." Gerald and Carl shed some tears as well. "I know, we almost lost our lives," Carl said solemnly. Thinking of what he had been through, he was still scared. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was sad to think about leaving his comrades and family behind. "It's all right. We're fine now," Gerald said, to comfort Glenn and himself. After they calmed down, Glenn turned to Henry and the others. "Henry, Ava, and Ariana, thank you so much for your help," he said gratefully. "Don't mention it. We're brothers. Now let's go back," Henry urged, and then they got in the car and left. "How are the other soldiers doing?" Henry asked Glenn, referring to his comrades who had been injured and were staying at the hospital. "They're much better after taking the pills you gave them," Glenn replied. Henry had given them Ariana's power crystals. "Great," Henry nodded. He knew that they would be fine after taking the power crystals, but he still needed to ask about their condition out of concern. An hour later, they arrived at the Military General Hospital in Mesquite and met the other members of the Red Flame. When the other teammates saw Gerald and Carl, they were extremely excited. They were much better now, but they were still injured, so Ariana gave them more power crystals and transferred magical power into their bodies through the air. When it was done, they thanked her over and over. After that, the injured soldiers continued to stay in the Military General Hospital, while Ariana and the others went to stay in a hotel. They planned to return to Los Angeles tomorrow at noon. They successfully finished the task this time, the pictures on their social media profiles, which aroused much envy. After all, famous people were always admired. Moreover, both Ariana and Henry had a high status. At 6:00 p.m., they got back to Los Angeles. The next day, Ariana started sending out the remaining invitation letters to her wedding celebration. Although she wasn't sure whether another problem would arise in the coming days, she didn't want to delay it. Even though she and Henry were already legally married, they never had an official ceremony or reception with their family and friends. When each guest received their invitation letter, they called Ariana and congratulated her in advance. It was tiring for her to answer everyone's calls, but she had to do it patiently. After all, everyone was wishing her the best. 3 days before Ariana and Henry's wedding, the news was released to the public, and it caused a sensation. Ariana was among the top 10 richest people in business. She was also the only female and was the youngest businesswoman on the list. Because of her great accomplishments, she was the focus of people's attention. It wasn't a secret that Ariana and Henry were going to get married, so it wasn't a big surprise when the news was released. But the topic of their wedding quickly became one of the hottest topics online. Lots of people immediately left comments, congratulating and complimenting them. Time flew, and soon it was the day before Ariana and Henry's wedding ceremony. On this day, Ariana's close friends all came and threw her a bachelorette party. At the party, everyone enjoyed themselves very much, but Anna had an absent look in her eyes, even though she tried to hide it with a smile. It was Ariana's party, and she didn't want to see any guests unhappy, so she asked Anna about it. "What's wrong? You look like there's something weighing on you. Are you in a bad mood?" she whispered to her. Anna was slightly surprised that Ariana noticed. "I thought I disguised it very well. How did you notice?" she asked. It was true that Anna seemed happy on the surface, and other people couldn't see that she was actually unhappy. But it was hard to hide her real feelings, especially in front of observant people like Ariana. Ariana smiled and replied, "You can't fool me." Since Ariana already noticed that Anna was indeed unhappy, she decided to be honest. "I'm having a hard time. A woman has been trying to steal Dirk away from me lately. She's always making fun of me in all kinds of ways. She even threatened me, wanting me to leave him. I don't know what to do," she sighed. "How's Dirk's attitude?" asked Ariana. "Dirk is protective of me, but the woman's father is his father's friend, so we can't be too straightforward. The woman won't stop stirring things up between us. I really want to beat her up, but she's been in the army for several years, so I definitely can't win if I fight her. She'd probably permanently disfigure me," Anna explained, feeling extremely aggrieved. "It sounds like this woman is indeed hateful and shameless, but since Dirk is protective of you, you should just ignore her and not see her again," Ariana suggested. Because Anna wasn't very good at fighting, she couldn't encourage her to fight against the woman. If Ariana was in the same situation, she could easily make the woman give in. However, she couldn't help Anna beat the woman. After all, there was no grudge between her and the woman, so it would only make the situation worse if she went to fight against her. "I know, I'm just angry. Anyway, it's not a big deal. Let's drink now." "Congratulations, Ariana," Anna insisted. She didn't want her bad mood to affect the others, so she changed the topic. "Thanks," Ariana thanked her, then clinked her glass against Anna's. At about midnight, they separated, because they would have to get up early the next morning. After all, they were Ariana's bridesmaids. The ones who lived in Los Angeles went back to their own homes. If they were from another city, they stayed at Aspen Haven in Ariana's house. Meanwhile, Henry's comrades and male friends were staying at the Regalo Hotel. It wasn't public that Henry owned the Regalo Hotel yet, so not many people knew about it. Given his special status, he didn't want to make it public. Henry didn't have the intention to show off his wealth. No matter whose name his companies were under, he didn't care. He only wanted to develop them and make profits. Ariana would stay in her house at Aspen Haven that night, because it was her home, and she would go to the wedding venue from there the next day. Therefore, the Flores family also stayed in her house at Aspen Haven because they needed to take her to the wedding venue. Ariana and Henry didn't see each other that night, and they only chatted on the phone before they went to sleep. "Are you nervous, sweetie?" Henry asked Ariana. "A little," Ariana admitted. Even though she could fight against a dozen monsters without feeling nervous, now that her wedding was about to be held tomorrow, she felt butterflies in her stomach. "How about you?" she asked Henry. "I'm nervous too," he answered. Ariana snorted with laughter, then joked, "Major General Ortiz, I can't believe you're nervous too." "It's more than I'm looking forward to tomorrow's wedding," Henry clarified. He had waited for it for so long. Although they already had their marriage certificate, he felt that their relationship wouldn't be finalized until they held a wedding ceremony. "I can't wait either," Ariana agreed. Right now she was filled with happiness. She had to say that she was happier than she had ever been since getting together with Henry. No one was more important to her than him. On the wedding day, the ceremony was held at Serenity Manor, and the fleet that came to pick Ariana up was unbelievably grand. No one had seen something like it before. There were not only cars, but helicopters that came to escort her to the venue. When Ariana walked out of her home in her wedding dress, flower petals fell from the air, which was extremely romantic and beautiful. Some reporters were allowed to take a video at the event location, so many parts of the wedding were aired as a live stream. It caused a sensation on the internet again and again. Many people left comments about how dreamy and romantic the wedding was. All the internet users were amazed and envious. At the entrance of the Serenity Manor, there were two endless lines of armed soldiers. Because of the Ortiz family's special status, all the guests were important figures, so the security had to be extremely tight. The wedding was like a display of the most powerful and wealthy people in the country, because most of the guests were tycoons in politics and business. The importance of the guests shocked the whole country, because nobody had seen so many tycoons at one wedding before. Those important people hadn't even shown up at other tycoons' weddings. This was enough to prove how powerful the Ortiz family, the Flores family, Ariana, and Henry's connections were. What people didn't know was that the most powerful people at the wedding were actually immortals, but they kept a low profile because they couldn't let the public know about their abilities. Ezekiel and the other immortals, who had a close relationship with Henry, were present, so no one would be able to cause any trouble today. Ariana looked exquisite today. She rarely put on makeup, or only wore light makeup, so she looked unusually stunning at her wedding. There was no one who wasn't jealous of her. Sid and Mosby came too, but they were leaders of illegal gangs, so they disguised themselves. Both of them had secretly admired Ariana in the past, so they were unhappy that she married another man, but they still watched quietly. The wedding went smoothly, and nothing bad happened, so Ariana and Henry were relieved. The ceremony was such an important event, so they didn't want any accidents to happen. During the dinner and reception, some of Henry's friends kept on joking about how they wouldn't allow the newlywed couple to sleep in peace that night. It was an old tradition to play pranks on the newlyweds on their wedding night. However, because Ariana and Henry didn't want to be bothered after their wedding was over, they got all of Henry's close friends drunk at dinner. Ariana and Henry were high-level immortals, so they wouldn't get drunk no matter how much they drank. "Why do I feel Ariana and Henry are getting them drunk on purpose?" Joelle asked, watching them all drink. "Because they are doing it on purpose," Roberta affirmed confidently. She was very sure of it. Anna couldn't understand it. "Why?" she asked. "Perhaps they don't want to be bothered after the wedding is over," Amber guessed. "Good point. I wouldn't like it either," Joelle said. She thought that Ariana and Henry's actions made sense. In the end, they didn't embarrass Ariana and Henry by pointing it out, because they sided with them. Besides, it was actually a little humiliating that so many men couldn't defeat Ariana and Henry in drinking. After they were all drunk, Ariana and Henry arranged for them to sleep. However, since they both seemed as clear-headed as always, while the other men were drunk, The rest of the guests were amazed. Sophia blurted out in surprise, "I don't get it. Why don't you look drunk at all? Everyone else can barely stand up straight." "It's a secret, and I can't tell you," Ariana replied, with a mysterious smile. She didn't tell the truth, because it was a bit hard to explain. "Come on, tell me, please. I'm so curious," Sophia begged. "We didn't drink alcohol. We drank water," Ariana claimed, although it wasn't the truth. That was the only explanation she could give. Sophia rounded her eyes in shock. "You are bad," she accused. "Shh, don't tell other people," Ariana urged, reminding Sophia to keep it a secret. "Don't worry, I won't," Sophia promised at once. After all the drunk men went to their rooms, Ariana and Henry went to theirs. That night, they made love even more passionately until daybreak, and both of them were exhausted. However, when they got up the next day, they used their magical power to get rid of their fatigue, so they were full of energy again. Those drunk men, however, didn't wake up until 2 p.m. They realized that Ariana and Henry had gotten them drunk on purpose, so they were upset. However, it was already in the past, so Ariana and Henry didn't care about their opinions. The next day, after all the guests left, the Ortiz family visited Christopher's grave. Henry seriously introduced Ariana to his father. When they came here before, Ariana was his girlfriend and fiancée, but this time, she was his wife and Christopher's daughter-in-law. Even though many years had passed, Ava still loved Christopher as much as she did before. Therefore, she felt heartbroken every time she visited his grave. After visiting Christopher, Ava told the others to go home without her, and she stayed there alone for a while longer. She talked to Christopher for several hours before she left. The day after that, Ariana and Henry went on their honeymoon. Their honeymoon lasted for a week, and nothing went wrong while they were gone, but Henry had to return to the military base after they got back. When Ariana was alone, she didn't go to stay in their new house, and instead went to stay at the Ortiz family's house. She was officially a member of their family now. The Ortiz family didn't change their attitude towards Ariana after she married into the family. Instead, they cared for and loved her as usual. After they had been married for a month, Ariana found out that she was pregnant. Because they were married now, they didn't use any contraception. Everyone was happy to know that Ariana was pregnant. She was always treated like a princess in the Ortiz family, and she was treated like a queen after she got pregnant. 9 months later, Ariana gave birth to a pair of twins. The boy was named Jack, and the girl was named Mia. When the kids were born, Ezekiel foresaw their future. The boy would live a peaceful life, but the girl would encounter serious trouble when she turned 18. Ezekiel couldn't see the result, so he didn't know what would happen to her after going through the trouble. Both Ariana and Henry were very worried when they heard that. They didn't tell other people, in case they were worried. Besides them, Ava was the only one who knew. 5 years later,
in a world of empty fridges, a hero emerges. McDelivery on the McDonald's app. Now get all your faves with a $0 delivery fee. So when hunger hits, will you strike back? McDelivery on the McDonald's app. Now on a phone near you. $0 delivery fee, 11% service fee, and $2 small order fee on orders under $12 before taxes and fees. And participating McDonald's in Canada on McDelivery orders placed using the McDonald's app and download and registration required. Taxes still apply.
Jack and Mia were 5 years old. Both of them were born with the talent of immortals and were geniuses. At a young age, they were already skilled at using their magical energy. They weren't just talented at cultivation, they were also good at studying. Although they didn't have a photographic memory like Ariana, they were quick learners. Ariana wanted them to have a normal childhood, so she took them out to have fun sometimes. The Ortiz family thought the two kids had so much talent because of Ariana. Henry spent most of his time at the military base. He would come back whenever he could, but it was mainly Ariana who took care of the two kids, so everyone believed that she was a great mother. Jack and Mia were very close, but they fought too. Especially after they cultivated, they practiced their skills by fighting with each other nearly every day. two kids inherited Ariana and Henry's abilities. Jack looked a lot like Henry, while Mia resembled Ariana, and both of them were very adorable. Even their personalities were similar to their parents. They were a lot more mature than their age, but they were still kids in the eyes of adults. Because both Jack and Mia were very smart, they didn't want to go to kindergarten because it was boring. The Ortiz family respected their decision and allowed them to stay at home. Therefore, before they began elementary school, Jack and Mia stayed at home to learn and play. Not many outsiders knew about them. They were smart and mature, but they had their naughty streaks too. They often secretly sneaked out of the house for fun. Whenever Ariana and Ava weren't home, the other people in the Ortiz family wouldn't really be aware of what they were up to. Therefore, one day, when Ariana and Ava were gone, Jack and Mia sneaked outside. They ambled around, hand in hand, down the sidewalk by the main road. Because they were so cute, they attracted a lot of attention and were given a lot of compliments. Precisely because they were so adorable and there were no adults with them, they attracted attention from bad people too. Mia, where are we going? Jack.